What's the best way to work with Blue Lotus? So many people ask me this, and my perspective is that there isn't one right way to work with any plant. It's really about your relationship to the plant, right? And then each plant have a different direction. So then there are some ways that are more beneficial, right? But it's really about your personal relationship. So like with a person, where it's like, what's the best way to hang out with this person? Well, there might be a general direction, but it's all individually. So I want to share a little bit about my relationship with Blue Lotus and how I like to work with it, and then that can inspire you, and you can find your own way. So for me, Blue Lotus, in a very obvious way, is a water plant, right? It has a clear affinity to water. It grows in water, and of course, all plants have an affinity to water, but there are some plants that are more fiery. Let's say pine, for me, is a very fiery plant. It's also good to burn. It's kind of this. Some plants are more airy. Some plants are very, I would say, earthy. Even though, again, like all plants have some, like all plants obviously have an affinity to earth and to water and to air and to fire in the way of connecting with the sun, right? But you could say some are more or less in each of the directions, and that's really where I like to start with different plants of like what do I feel their general affinity is, and then I'll start there, and then it can move into different places. So there are many ways you could then say, okay, a water affinity, that's where I would start. So that could be in a steam, that could be in a tea, that could be in a bath, but any sort of connecting it with water. And I do know that some people smoke Blue Lotus. I've never done it, and I'm not sure I ever will, but I probably will at one point. I like to test things out. I don't feel Blue Lotus and fire together. That for me is almost too violent. However, I'm also super hypersensitive, and I really like the simplicity of Blue Lotus and water. So like again, some people like to smoke it, and some people like it in incense. Do that if that's like the way that works for you. My way is really like going deep with the water. And so water isn't just water, right? There's structured water, there's unstructured water. If you don't know anything about it, basically just there's more water that's more alive and healing than other water. So like your general tap water in a city is different than if you go out and find a spring or a natural spring, right? A water that's been standing in your fridge for some time is different than a water that's been like out standing and getting like the morning dew. And so we can like work with the alchemy of water with Blue Lotus. And so if I say a tea, for many that would be like, okay, then I pour boiling hot water over it. And that's also a way you can do it. My preference, like what I prefer, can you say preference? What I prefer is really to give it time to seep in. So I like to put Blue Lotus in cold, as much spring water or rainwater, like beautiful water as possible, and really let it seep over time. So like all the magic, it can kind of slowly seep into it, and I do that with ritual. I do that with prayer, like in some way some might call it prayer, some might call it manifestation, some might call it placebo, like whatever word you put on it. I work with spells, or I work with the alchemy of it, but in cold water is actually how I like it the best. Then I feel that's such a natural way. It can like seep out, it can slowly, usually we would work with a dry plant, right? Unless you're fortunate enough to live in a place where it grows fresh. But most of us would have a plant like this that's dry. And so working with that in water and slowly, so for instance, overnight, I really like to put it out in my garden under the moon, and then just seeping out in it, and then the day after it has this kind of sweetness to it, and then you can heat it up if you want it hot. But then that's the tea I would drink, that's the tea I would work with. That's my favorite way. I with that water, I'll work with that water. I'll put water over it again. I'll do that several times. I'll like bath in it, do a plant bath. I'll drink it. I'll meditate with it, like all these different ways. So that's my preferred method, and that's what I would invite you to start with. Now, there's so many other ways to do it as well. What I do want to mention as well is that I actually really like when we work with plants without having to harvest or intake them. So actually working with the plant, just having the blue lotus and meditating with it, just sitting with it in your hand. You don't have to take it in, you don't have to consume anything to connect with the energy, right? And that for me is one of the most pure and one of the most beautiful ways. Another, which is also with the water, is doing it a little more like a flower essence, like that energy of like having the essence in the water, and then I don't know if you know how flower essences work, but it's kind of getting the essence of the flower in the water, and then that water you kind of mix up with alcohol, and you like drop that, and it kind of gets, so to speak, like drops of that gets in something else that gets it, and then and you take that in. That for me is also, you really work with the vibration of it, which is also kind of a beautiful way with Blue Lotus. Yeah. I also think there's a point in, there's kind of two perspectives on what I want to say now with this plant, or plants in general, I think, but with this right now, there's one thing about working with a plant over time where it's like, it's not like a pill. You can't just be like, oh, I want some peace in my life, I'll just drink Blue Lotus tea one evening and then it's all fixed, right? You gotta be consistent in it. And with many plants, I would suggest, I mean, obviously not the plants that might have such a powerful physical, like, contraindication to something you have. So if it's plants, let's say like anything, if it's plants that like interact with whatever medicine you're taking, or like prescription drugs or whatever you have, then check that out. But in a case like this, it makes sense to work with it over a longer period of time. Let's say 6 weeks, like daily for 6 weeks. Really like have that practice. However, I also feel with a plant, especially with a plant like Blue Lotus, I feel it's so precious. Like the flowers bloom once a year, right? So it's not like nettle or dandelion that just like springs up everywhere and it's so abundant and you can just go crazy. This is a plant that is way more rare. And so I actually don't drink it so much. I don't use it so much. I meditate with it again. I'm with it. So if I take one of these plants and I have them in water, I'll make a lot of water, and then I'll like use that water for a long period of time, and that's like what I will work with. And so it's really not, I don't even use like a flower a month. I use way less. But when I started connecting with Blue Lotus, I did a longer period of time with more of it. Yeah, so those are some of my inputs. I hope you can use it. If you have any questions, you're welcome to write me. So in the beginning of next year, 2025, we're going to do a Blue Lotus Initiation. Really beautiful. So it's 8 weeks journey online. It's actually possible to do it online. We're going to record it, but it's so to do it online, but also to come here physically for those sessions, including like a 10 days pilgrimage to Egypt, where we're going to go to the temples and pray with the lotus. So this is such a precious, powerful container, and I'm really excited to share it. If you're curious about that, I'll post the link, or wherever this video is. I hope the link is. Otherwise, you can go to our webpage, mightytree.dk. Yeah. Wishing you so much fun with it. Bye.